I was never supposed to end up this way. If you had asked me when I was a little girl, I would have told you I wanted to be a teacher, or maybe a lawyer. My notebooks were filled with drawings of courtrooms and classrooms, my imagination painting a brighter future than the one that would eventually claim me. But childhood dreams rarely survive in homes cracked by divorce, in households where the people who were supposed to protect you choose themselves instead. I was 8 years old when my father walked out of our lives. I remember the sound of his footsteps more clearly than the sound of his voice. Heavy, determined, echoing through the thin walls of our small rented apartment. My mother was sitting on the couch, her eyes red, clutching the hem of her dress like it was the last thing tethering her to sanity. My father didn't look back when he closed the door. At first, I thought it was just another argument. My parents had fought many times before shouting over bills. My mother accusing him of spending money on women at his office. My father saying he was tired of being nagged. But this fight was different. This time he packed a suitcase. This time, the slam of the door was final. I waited for weeks, asking my mother if he would come back. She would force a smile, brush my hair and say, "He just needs some time." But when the letters from the court arrived, when the divorce papers lay flat and lifeless on our dining table, I knew time wouldn't fix anything. It's strange, the way absence becomes heavier than presence. My father's empty chair at the dinner table was louder than any words he could have spoken. His absence bled into everything, into the way my mother carried herself, shoulders slumped from exhaustion, into the way I stopped raising my hand in class because I was too tired to finish my homework without electricity, into the way I stopped believing birthdays meant anything because there were no gifts, no cards, no father to say he was proud of me. My mother tried. Lord knows she tried. She picked up 2 jobs, working mornings at a diner and evenings at a laundromat. I rarely saw her except when she came home late at night. Her hands cracked from detergent, her eyes swollen from lack of sleep. She smelled of soap and coffee and heartbreak. She never said it out loud, but I could see it in her face. She was drowning, and she was pulling me along with her. By the time I turned 13, the world had already taught me the truth. No one was coming to save us. My father had remarried, moved to another state, and from what I heard through relatives, he was living a comfortable life. A new wife, a new house, a new daughter. He sent no child support, no money for school uniforms, no calls on holidays. To him, I was a shadow that had conveniently faded with divorce. That's when I began to feel the weight of education slipping from my hands. I loved school, loved the feel of crisp pages and the smell of chalk. I was a bright student. Teachers told me so often. But brightness doesn't pay for field trips or lunch money. Brightness doesn't buy you textbooks when your classmates are already flipping through the latest editions. One afternoon, after being sent home for the 3rd time, because I couldn't pay a fee for science, lab equipment, I remember sitting on the cracked steps outside my school and staring at the sky. I asked myself why my father didn't care. Why he could pay for his new daughter's piano lessons, but not for my biology project. Why he could smile in family photographs with strangers, while I was skipping meals so my mother could eat. That day was the first time I hated him. Truly hated him. But hate doesn't fill empty stomachs. Hate doesn't stop the landlord from banging on the door, shouting about overdue rent. Hate doesn't silence the whispers of classmates who call you charity case behind your back. As the years passed, I became skilled at pretending. I pretended the hole in my sneakers was just a fashion choice. I pretended I wasn't hungry when my friends shared fries after school. I pretended my father's absence didn't matter. But every pretense was a layer of armor, and beneath it, the truth gnawed at me. By 16, I had grown into someone my younger self wouldn't recognize. Not because I wanted to, but because survival molds you into something unplanned. I got a part-time job at a grocery store, stocking shelves for minimum wage, just to help my mother. The money barely stretched, but it was something. We could buy rice and beans, maybe even meat once a week. But the grocery store also showed me another truth. No matter how hard I worked, it would never be enough. The manager sneered at me, cutting my hours whenever he felt like it. Customers looked through me as though I were invisible. And always, in the back of my mind, was the echo of what could have been. If only my father had paid for my education. If only he had remembered that I was his daughter. I tried applying for scholarships, pouring my soul into essays about resilience and ambition. Some responses were kind rejections, others were silence. I started to believe the universe had already written my fate. And it was written in poverty. By 17, the cracks widened. My mother fell ill. Years of working 2 jobs finally took their toll. She collapsed at work one night, and I rushed to the hospital to find her weak and trembling, her body begging for rest she couldn't afford. Medical bills piled up faster than I could count. I begged family members for help, but most of them turned their backs, whispering about my mother's choices, about how she should have married someone better. That was when I reached my breaking point. It wasn't a dramatic decision. It wasn't as if I woke up one morning and said, "I will sell myself today." No, it was quieter, sadder than that. It was me sitting at our kitchen table, staring at bills, staring at my mother asleep on the couch with a fever, and realizing I had nothing left. No scholarships, no savings, no father. I had only myself. And so, when the opportunity came, when a girl I knew from school whispered to me about quick money, about men who would pay for a night of company, I didn't slam the door on it. I didn't scream or say never. I just listened. And then I asked, how much? Because in that moment, pride was a luxury I couldn't afford. That night, lying in bed, I thought about the little girl I once was, the girl who dreamed of teaching, of courtrooms and justice. She was gone, replaced by someone harder, someone who had learned that neglect can carve you into shapes you never wanted to be. And at the center of it all was my father, the man who could have saved me from this path with a single check, a single ounce of care, the man who had chosen a new life over the daughter he left behind. I closed my eyes, and for the first time, I accepted the truth. My father's neglect had written my story, and I would have to live with the price. The first time I thought seriously about college, I was 12. My English teacher, Mrs. Richards, leaned over my desk after reading my essay on To Kill a Mockingbird. She tapped her pen against the paper and said, "You write like someone who belongs in university classrooms. Don't waste this gift." Her words lit a spark in me. That night, I stayed awake long after my mother went to bed, staring at the ceiling and imagining myself walking across a campus, books in hand, my hair blowing in the wind like the girls I'd seen in glossy brochures. I saw myself graduating, wearing a cap and gown, my mother crying in the audience because her daughter had made it out. For years, I clung to that dream. It was the rope I held onto whenever reality threatened to pull me under. Even when I saw my father driving past once in a shiny new car, his new wife seated beside him, their little girl in the back seat with ribbons in her hair. Even then, I whispered to myself, "I'll go to college. I'll prove I don't need him." But dreams are fragile things, and reality has a way of grinding them into dust. By the time I graduated high school, I was exhausted. I had worked every shift the grocery store offered me, skipped meals to save pennies, and begged for scholarship opportunities. I filled out application after application, pouring pieces of my soul into essays about resilience, about wanting a better future. Some responses came back. "Congratulations, but unfortunately, we cannot offer financial aid at this time." Others simply said, We regret to inform you. I kept the rejection letters in a shoebox under my bed, as if some part of me believed that holding onto them would prove the world had seen me, even if it had turned me away. When my acceptance letter finally arrived from a small community college, I screamed. I remember clutching the paper to my chest, running into the living room, and shaking my mother awake. She cried, hugging me so tightly I could barely breathe. For a brief moment, it felt like the world had cracked open, and light was finally spilling through. But then came the tuition bill. Even community college wasn't free. The numbers printed on that sheet of paper might as well have been a death sentence. My mother's face fell when she saw it. Her hands trembled as she set the paper down on the coffee table, unable to meet my eyes. "We'll figure it out," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'll get another job. I'll apply for loans. Something will work out." But deep down, I knew the truth. Loans required credit we didn't have. Extra jobs required hours I couldn't spare. And my father had long since made it clear I wasn't his responsibility. I tried anyway. I worked mornings at the grocery store, evenings cleaning offices, and weekends babysitting. My body ached, my grades slipped. And every time I thought I was close to catching up, another bill arrived. Books, fees, transportation. It was endless. One afternoon, I found myself staring at my reflection in the glass doors of the college library. My eyes were red from lack of sleep. My clothes hung loose from skipped meals, and my hair was frizzy from neglect. I looked more like someone twice my age. Inside, students laughed, tossed frisbees on the lawn, and complained about homework. They were living the dream I had fought so hard to touch, and I was already slipping away from it. The breaking point came one rainy evening. I had just finished the shift cleaning offices when I checked my bank account. Negative balance. Again. My stomach clenched as I realized rent was due in 2 days. My mother was already behind on medical bills. The electricity company had left a final notice on our door. That night, I walked home in the rain, clutching my jacket tightly around me, and whispered to myself, "This isn't fair." I repeated it like a prayer, like a mantra. This isn't fair. This isn't fair. But fairness doesn't exist when you're poor. It was then that I remembered the girl from high school, the one who had once whispered to me about quick money, about men who would pay for company. Back then, I had dismissed her with disgust. But now, standing in the rain with nothing in my pockets and despair in my chest, her words sounded less like corruption and more like salvation. The first step was the hardest. Reaching out, asking questions. I hated myself for it. Hated how desperate I had become. But desperation silences shame. The girl, her name was Jasmine, took me under her wing. She was only a year older than me, but carried herself like someone twice her age. Her nails were long and painted, her clothes sleek and expensive. She smelled of perfume I could never afford. "You're lucky," she told me one night as we sat in her car outside a hotel. "You've got the kind of face that makes men open their wallets without you even asking. Trust me, they'll pay good money for someone like you." I wanted to vomit. I wanted to run. But I thought of my mother coughing in her sleep, of the rejection letters, of the bills piling higher and higher. And I stayed. The first client was awkward. He was old enough to be my father. His cologne clung to the air, making me gag. I remember staring at the ceiling the entire time, counting the cracks in the plaster, praying it would be over quickly. When he finally left and I saw the stack of bills on the nightstand, I felt a strange mixture of disgust and relief. That money paid for rent that month. It bought my mother's medicine. It bought groceries that filled our fridge for the first time in weeks. But it also bought me a new identity. I was no longer just the girl who dreamed of college. I was no longer just the daughter of a neglectful father. I was something else now, someone living a double life. Someone learning how to smile for strangers in hotel rooms, while crying in the shower afterward. At first, I told myself it was temporary. Just until we caught up on bills. Just until my mother was better. Just until I saved enough for tuition. But temporary solutions have a way of becoming permanent. When life keeps pressing you down. I learned the rules quickly. Don't get attached. Don't trust anyone. Don't let them know your real name. And above all, don't think too much. Thinking was dangerous. Thinking reminded me of who I used to be. Of who I wanted to be. But at night, when I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I couldn't stop the thoughts. They came like waves, crashing over me. I thought of my father, of the way he had left us, of the way he had chosen comfort over responsibility. I wondered if he would even care if he knew what I was doing to survive. Probably not. And so, piece by piece, the dream of college crumbled. Every shift, every rejection letter, every night with a stranger chipped away at it until all that remained was survival. Dreams were for people who had fathers that paid tuition, for people who had safety nets, for people who had never felt hunger gnaw at their stomachs. Dreams were not for me. By the end of that year, I stopped talking about college altogether. My mother noticed, but she didn't press me. Maybe she was too tired. Maybe she already knew. Instead, I focused on the here and now. Paying rent, buying food, keeping the lights on. And every time I handed my mother a stack of cash, every time I told her not to worry, that things were under control, I smiled. But inside, I knew the truth. This was not the life I wanted. This was not the life I deserved. This was the life neglect had forced me into. And my father was the reason. By the time I turned 19, I had become two different people. By day, I was the quiet, hard-working daughter who handed her mother envelopes of cash and said, "Don't worry, Mom, everything's under control." By night, I was someone else entirely, someone who wore red lipstick too bright for her age, who slipped into hotels under fake names, who learned to turn her heart into stone, while strangers whispered lies into her ear. It was survival. That's what I told myself every time guilt clawed at my chest. I wasn't doing this for fun. I wasn't doing this because I wanted to. I was doing this because my father had abandoned me. Because college tuition was impossible. Because life had cornered me, and I had nowhere else to turn. But living two lives takes a toll. I started to lose pieces of myself without realizing it. My laughter became rehearsed. My eyes learned how to smile while the rest of my face stayed numb. Even my walk changed, heels clicking confidently on the pavement when, inside, I was still that terrified girl counting cracks on the ceiling. There were nights when I came home so exhausted. I collapsed on the couch, still wearing my makeup, the smell of men's cologne clinging to my skin. I would scrub myself raw in the shower, trying to wash away the shame, but it never really left. It seeped into me, deep and permanent, like ink. The money was good, better than anything I could have made working at the grocery store. Rent was paid on time. My mother's medicine was bought without hesitation. Sometimes I even treated her to small luxuries: a new blanket, a better pair of shoes, dinner from her favorite takeout place. She would look at me with teary eyes and say, "Baby, I don't know what I'd do without you." And I would smile even as my stomach twisted into knots, because I knew one day she would find out. And she did. It was a Wednesday evening, quiet and ordinary. I had just come back from meeting a client, a wad of cash tucked inside my purse. I thought my mother was asleep, but as I slipped into the apartment, she was waiting for me in the living room. The look on her face said everything. She had found out. "Where is this money coming from?" she asked, her voice trembling. My mouth went dry. For a second, I thought about lying, about spinning some story about extra shifts at the office cleaning job. But her eyes, tired, desperate, searching cut right through me. I sat down across from her, unable to hold her gaze. "I'm doing what I have to do," I whispered. Her face crumpled. She covered her mouth with her hand as tears spilled down her cheeks. "No, no. Tell me you're not saying what I think you're saying." I stayed silent. That silence was louder than any confession. My mother sobbed, rocking back and forth like she was trying to hold herself together. "I worked so hard to keep you safe," she cried. "I broke my back so you wouldn't have to. And this is what it's come to." Anger flared in me then, sharp and hot. "You think I wanted this?" I snapped. "You think I dreamed of this when I was a little girl?" "No, I wanted college. I wanted a life. But I spat the word like poison. He left us with nothing. He abandoned me. And now this is all I have." The room went silent after my outburst. My mother stared at me, her face pale with shock. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, she whispered, "I should have protected you." And just like that, the anger drained out of me, leaving only exhaustion. I leaned back on the couch, closing my eyes. It's too late for that now. From that day on, something shifted between us. My mother never mentioned it again. She didn't ask questions, didn't demand details. She simply accepted the envelopes of money with trembling hands, her shame heavy in the air. We became co-conspirators in silence. But silence doesn't erase pain. The double life grew heavier with time. Some clients were easy, lonely men who wanted someone to listen to their stories, who paid more for conversation than anything else. Others were cruel, rough, demanding, men who saw me as nothing, more than an object they had purchased for the night. One evening, I ended up in a hotel room with a man who frightened me. His smile was too sharp, his grip too tight. He wanted things I wasn't willing to give. When I tried to leave, he blocked the door. For the first time, I realized how dangerous this life truly was. I had no safety net, no one to call, no father to protect me. I managed to escape that night, but the terror stayed with me. I stopped sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, felt his hands on my arms. I told Jasmine about it the next day. She shrugged, lighting a cigarette. "That's the risk we take. You want easy money, you pay the price." Her words chilled me. That was when I began to hate myself even more. I wasn't just living a double life. I was living a dangerous one that could kill me. But what choice did I have? I couldn't go back to the grocery store, not when the bills were higher than ever. I couldn't suddenly pretend I could afford college, not when tuition was out of reach. And I couldn't rely on a father who had proven time and time again that I was nothing to him. So I stayed. I kept going. But with every passing month, the weight grew heavier. My reflection became a stranger. The girl who once dreamed of walking across a stage in a cap and gown was gone, replaced by someone hardened, someone haunted. And no matter how much money I handed my mother, no matter how many times I told her not to worry, I couldn't silence the truth in my heart. I was drowning. And the man who could have thrown me a lifeline, the man who could have changed everything with a single act of care, was living comfortably in another state, pretending I didn't exist. Every time I thought of him, my anger deepened. My resentment grew like a fire I couldn't put out, because my life had become a nightmare, and he was the reason why. I had imagined the moment 1,000 times in my head. The day I would finally stand in front of my father, no longer a helpless little girl waiting for him to come home, but a grown woman with scars he had carved into me through his absence. For years, I told myself it would never happen, that he had erased me from his life so completely. There would never be a chance. But life has a cruel sense of timing. It happened on an ordinary afternoon. I was walking downtown after leaving a client's hotel. trying to shake the stink of cologne from my skin. When I saw him, he was stepping out of a shiny black car parked outside a restaurant, his hand resting protectively on the shoulder of a girl who looked about 12. His daughter. My half-sister. She laughed, clutching a shopping bag, while his wife walked beside them, glamorous in a way my mother had never been. And him, my father, he looked exactly as I remembered, only older. A little greyer, a little heavier, but unmistakable. My breath caught. My body froze. It was like being 8 years old again, watching him walk out of our apartment, suitcase in hand. Except this time, I wasn't a child. I wasn't powerless. Before I knew what I was doing, my feet carried me across the street. Dad! The word burst out of me before I could stop it. It tasted strange on my tongue, like a foreign language I hadn't spoken in years. He turned, his smile fading the moment his eyes landed on me. For a second, I saw recognition flicker in his face. And then came the frown, the tightening of his jaw. "Excuse me?" he said, his voice cool. I laughed bitterly. "Don't act like you don't know me. I'm your daughter." His wife looked between us, confused. His younger daughter tilted her head curiously. "Is this true?" the woman asked. My father's face reddened. He put an arm around his new family, shielding them like I was some kind of threat. "Let's go inside," he muttered, trying to usher them away. But I wasn't letting him escape. Not this time. "No." My voice rose, sharp enough to make passers-by turn their heads. "You don't get to walk away again. Not after everything you've done to me." He froze. His wife's eyes widened. "What are you talking about?" she asked. I took a step closer, my hands shaking, my voice breaking. "You left me. You left Mom. You never paid for my school. Never sent a single dollar, not even a birthday card. Do you know what your neglect did to me? Do you even care?" For the first time, his mask cracked. His eyes darted around nervously, as strangers slowed to watch the scene unfolding. "Not here," he hissed. "We'll talk later." "No," I said firmly, my voice trembling with rage. "We'll talk now." His wife stepped forward. "Is this true, Michael? You never supported her." He said nothing, and in that silence, I felt something inside me snap. Years of pain, years of shame, years of selling pieces of myself just to survive, all of it surged to the surface. "You want to know what your neglect did to me?" I shouted. My throat burned with every word. It forced me onto the streets. It forced me into hotel rooms with strangers, just so I could pay rent and buy food for. "Mom, do you hear me? I became a prostitute because of you." Gasps rippled through the small crowd gathering around us. His wife's face turned pale. His younger daughter clutched her shopping bag tighter, confused and frightened. And my father, my so-called father, looked at me like I was filth, like I was embarrassing him. "How dare you say that in front of my family?" he snapped. I laughed, a sound full of bitterness. "Your family? What about me? Was I not your family too? Or did I stop mattering the moment you found a new wife? A new daughter to play daddy with?" He ran a hand through his hair, his voice rising. "You don't understand the choices I had to make." "No," I cut him off. "You don't understand what your choices cost me. While you were buying toys for her, I was skipping meals. While you were paying for her piano lessons, I was begging teachers for old textbooks. While you were smiling in family photos, I was selling myself to men twice my age just to keep the lights on." Tears streamed down my face, hot and relentless. My voice cracked, but I didn't care. I wanted every word to pierce him like a knife. His wife covered her mouth, horrified. His younger daughter hid behind her. And my father, he just stood there, silent. That silence was worse than any insult he could have thrown at me. Finally, I wiped my tears, my chest heaving. I used to dream of you coming back. I used to hope you'd show up at one of my school plays or send money for college. But now I see the truth. My voice dropped to a whisper, cold and final. You were never a father. Not to me. I turned to leave, but his wife's voice stopped me. Wait, please. Let's talk about this. I shook my head. I didn't come here for your pity. I just wanted him to hear it. To know what his neglect turned me into. That's all. And then I walked away, leaving him standing there in his expensive suit, surrounded by the family he had chosen over me. For the first time in years, I felt lighter. Not because the pain was gone, it never would be, but because I had finally said what needed to be said. I had given the shame back to the man who deserved it. That night, lying in bed, I replayed the confrontation over and over in my mind. Part of me still wished he had begged for forgiveness, had reached out, had admitted he was wrong. But deep down, I knew better. Men like him don't apologize. Men like him rewrite history so they can sleep at night. And I realized something important. I didn't need his apology. I didn't need his money. I didn't need him. For so long, I had been living in the shadow of his absence, blaming him for every broken dream, every wrong turn. And while he was responsible for my pain, I was the one who had to decide what came next. I couldn't keep drowning in anger. I couldn't keep living in shame. If he had abandoned me, then I would abandon the version of myself that still waited for him. I would rise. Not for him. Not even for my mother. For me. Rise. The day after I confronted my father, I woke up with swollen eyes from crying, but my chest felt strangely lighter. For years, I had carried his absence like a chain around my neck. Now, for the first time, I had cut it loose. The pain was still there, yes, but so was something else. A flicker of strength I hadn't felt in years. That morning, as I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, I studied my reflection. For too long, I had only seen the shame, the heavy makeup, the tired eyes, the girl who sold herself to survive. But as I looked closer, I noticed something I had never acknowledged before. I was still standing, despite everything, the neglect, the poverty, the rejection letters, the dangerous nights. I was still here, breathing, fighting, alive. And that meant something. I decided then and there that I wouldn't let my father's choices define me any longer. His neglect had shaped me, yes, but it would not be the final word on my life. The first step was the hardest. Leaving prostitution behind. It wasn't easy. The money had become a lifeline. Letting go of it felt like stepping off a cliff without a parachute. But I knew if I didn't stop now, I never would. That life would swallow me whole, and I refused to let that be my ending. So I told Jasmine I was done. She laughed, flicking ash from her cigarette. Nobody just walks away, sweetheart. You'll be back when the bills pile up again. But I shook my head. No, I'm not coming back. I can't. Her eyes narrowed. Then good luck. You'll need it. Maybe she was right. Maybe I would fail. But I had to try. I went back to cleaning jobs. Back to late nights scrubbing office floors. Back to minimum wage paychecks that barely stretched far enough. It was grueling, humiliating even, after tasting the kind of money I used to make. But every night when I collapsed into bed, I felt a quiet pride. Because the money in my pocket now wasn't stained with shame. It was mine. Honest. Hard-earned. My mother noticed the change in me. She didn't say anything, but I caught her watching me sometimes, her eyes soft, filled with something I hadn't seen in years' hope. One evening, she placed her hand on mine across the dinner table. I'm proud of you, she whispered. Tears stung my eyes. For so long, I had craved those words. And now, hearing them from her, it was like balm on an open wound. But I wasn't content with just surviving. I wanted more. The dream of college, though buried under years of struggle, still burned quietly inside me. I wasn't the same wide-eyed girl who thought a degree would solve everything. But I still believed in the power of education. So I applied again. Not to the big universities that had once rejected me, but to a small program offering evening classes for working adults. The tuition was lower, and financial aid covered most of it. I used what little savings I had to pay the rest. The first night I walked into that classroom, clutching a second-hand backpack, I felt like I could breathe again. The room smelled of old books and ink, and for the first time in years, I wasn't pretending to be someone else. I was just me, a student, hungry for knowledge, determined to rise. It wasn't easy. Balancing classes with work left me exhausted. There were nights when I wanted to quit, when I thought maybe Jasmine had been right. Maybe I should have stayed in the life I left behind. But every time doubt crept in, I reminded myself of that day outside the restaurant. I reminded myself of my father's silence, of the way he looked at me like I was nothing, and I vowed to prove him wrong. Slowly, I began to rebuild. I made friends in class, other adults, who had been knocked down by life, but refused to stay down. We shared stories, encouraged each other, studied late into the night. For the first time, I didn't feel alone in my struggle. One professor in particular, Dr. Henderson, took notice of me. He pulled me aside after class one evening and said, "You've got something special. Don't waste it. Keep going." Those words became fuel. I poured myself into my studies, writing essays late at night, reading textbooks on the bus to work. My grades soared, and with every passing semester, my confidence grew. But it wasn't just about school. It was about reclaiming myself. I started journaling, pouring my pain onto paper instead of letting it rot inside me. I wrote about my childhood, about my father, about the nights I wished I could forget. And slowly, the shame began to loosen its grip. One day, a classmate stumbled upon one of my journal entries and encouraged me to submit it to a local writing contest. I hesitated, but eventually I did. To my shock, I won. The prize wasn't much, just a small scholarship and publication in a community magazine, but to me, it was everything. For the first time, my voice had been heard. My story, my truth, had value. And that was when I realized something powerful. I could use my past, not as chains to hold me down, but as a weapon to rise. I began speaking at local community centers, sharing my story with young women on the edge of the same path I had once walked. I told them about neglect, about survival, about choices that can scar you forever. And I told them about resilience. At first, it was terrifying. Standing in front of strangers, exposing wounds I had spent years hiding. But with every speech, I grew stronger. And when girls came up to me afterward, tears in their eyes, saying, "Thank you. You made me feel less alone," I knew I had found a new purpose. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was helping others survive too. Years later, I graduated from that small program with honors. My mother sat in the audience, clapping with pride, tears streaming down her face. As I walked across the stage, wearing my cap and gown, I felt the ghost of that 12-year-old girl inside me, the one who had once dreamed of this moment finally smiling. My father wasn't there. He never would be. But for the first time, I didn't care, because I had learned the most important lesson of all. His neglect had shaped me, but it had not broken me. I had broken free. And as I stood on that stage, diploma in hand, I vowed that my story would not end in shame. It would end in triumph. Not because of him, but in spite of him. It is obvious you enjoyed watching this interesting and educative story. Please, go to the comment section and drop your comments. subscribe and share. Always watch out for these kind of educative story here. Thank you for watching.